When the world thinks of Yaman, they imagine a man of confidence, the actor who conquers every screen, the star who walks into any room and owns it. But behind the spotlight, behind the applause, there's a silence that only he hears. That silence has a name, and it's Demet Özdemir. It started one night in Rome. The city lights were dim, and the rain had just begun to fall. Ken sat alone at his piano, his fingers hesitating over the keys, as if every note would pull him back into a memory he had tried so hard to bury. On the desk beside him, there was a worn photograph, Demet, smiling, wearing that white dress she loved during the Turkish days. He had told himself countless times, "It's over. It's time to move on." But the truth was simple: you don't move on from something that changed you forever. And so, that night, without meaning to, he began to play. A melody emerged, soft, fragile, almost trembling. It was the sound of everything he had never said out loud. He called the song "You Left. But Your Heart Stayed With Me." It wasn't meant to be heard. It wasn't meant for the world. It was a conversation between two souls who could no longer speak. As he sang the first lines, something in him broke. "I still hear your laughter in my sleep. I still walk where you once stood." The lyrics weren't planned, they came like tears that refused to wait. Every word was a confession, every chord a memory. He wasn't just singing about love. He was singing about loss, about timing, about how sometimes life gives you everything you've ever wanted, just to take it away before you're ready. When the final note faded, Ken didn't move. He just sat there, his eyes fixed on the empty chair across from him, the chair she used to sit in. The rain outside turned heavier, like the sky itself was echoing his pain. For a moment, he thought he saw her there, smiling faintly, the way she always did when she caught him lost in thought. But when he blinked, she was gone. He pressed save on the recording. The file name appeared on the screen: "Avid is left in my hands." It was a small tribute, a phrase only he and Demet would understand. Because back when they filmed Turkish, she once told him, half-jokingly, "If one day we stop talking, you'll have all the memories. Avid, our story, will be in your hands." That night, her words came true. He didn't know it yet, but that song would become more than just a melody. It would become a confession, one that the world would eventually hear, and never forget. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but that night, that song, never left him. Ken would wake up in the middle of the night, hearing the echo of his own voice in his mind. The melody haunted him like a ghost, following him through sets, interviews, and sleepless nights in hotel rooms that all looked the same. He had promised himself never to release it. Not because it wasn't beautiful. It was, heartbreakingly so, but because it was too personal. It wasn't written for fame, or charts, or applause. It was a confession wrapped in melody, and the only person it truly belonged to was Demet. Sometimes, when he played it again in private, he'd close his eyes and imagine she could hear it. He'd picture her somewhere in Istanbul, maybe in her own apartment, scrolling through her phone at night, and for just a second, he'd imagine she stopped. That she felt something. That somehow, across miles and silence, she sensed the same ache he did. Because what they had wasn't ordinary. They had shared laughter that turned into rumors. Friendship that turned into something deeper, even when neither dared to name it. And when their paths separated, they both learned the cruelest truth: love doesn't always end, it just hides, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Ken's song wasn't a cry for attention. It was his way of keeping her close in a world that constantly tried to pull them apart. He remembered her last words before everything ended, soft, almost trembling: "Promise me you won't turn what we had into a story for the public." And he had kept that promise, mostly. The world never heard their private story, not through interviews, not through gossip. But it came out in his art. In every role where he looked into his co-star's eyes and saw hers instead. In every scripted kiss that reminded him of the one kiss that wasn't scripted at all. And when he sang the refrain again, "You left, but your heart stayed with me," he realized it wasn't just about her leaving. It was about what she left behind. Her warmth. Her laugh. Her silence. her ghost. People often talk about moving on like it's a simple thing, like it's a door you just close and never open again. But can you know the truth, some doors don't close. Some stay half open forever, whispering what ifs every time you walk by. That's why, even as he traveled from Rome to Madrid, from Istanbul to Milan, the song followed him. During a commercial shoot, one of the crew members overheard him humming it quietly and asked, "That melody, it's beautiful. Who's it for?" Ken smiled faintly, hiding the storm in his chest. "Someone I'll never stop writing for." No one asked again. But that moment marked something new, a shift in him. For the first time in years, he started to think, maybe the world deserved to know. Maybe it was time to let the song speak, not to exploit his pain, but to honor it. He didn't know it yet, but fate was already preparing a twist, a coincidence that would soon bring the song back to the one person who inspired it. It was a quiet evening in Istanbul when Demet first heard the song. She didn't even know it was his, not at first. She was at home, scrolling through her phone after a long day on set, her hair still tied up, her makeup half removed. She often listened to soft playlists on YouTube before sleeping. Random songs, unknown artists, gentle words that helped her escape the noise of fame. But that night, one song started playing, one that made her heart freeze after the first few notes. The title on the screen read, "You left. But your heart stayed with me, unknown artist." Her breath caught. The voice, that deep, raw, unmistakable tone, she knew it instantly. It was him. It was Can. At first, she thought she was imagining things. The internet was full of fan edits, fake audios, and rumors about them. But then came the lyrics. "I still walk where you once stood, I still chase the light you left behind." Tears welled up before she even realized it. The emotions in his voice weren't just performance, they were memories. Their memories. Every word, every pause, every sigh, it was like he was right there beside her again, saying everything he hadn't said when it mattered most. She covered her mouth with her hand, whispering to herself, he really did it. The melody carried her back years in time, back to the set of her Kenzie Cuss, where they laughed between takes, stealing glances that everyone noticed but no one dared to comment on. She remembered how he used to hum while waiting for the next scene. He had a habit, when something was on his mind, he'd create melodies out of thin air. And one night, she'd told him, half teasing, "One day, you'll write a song about me." He had laughed and said, "If I ever do, it means I couldn't forget you." And now, here she was, years later, listening to proof that he hadn't. Demet paused the song halfway through, unable to take it anymore. The tears wouldn't stop. It wasn't just the beauty of it, it was the pain. The kind of pain you feel when you realize someone loved you more than they ever showed, and maybe you let them go too soon. She picked up her phone and hesitated. Her finger hovered over his name. Should I call him? It had been months since they'd spoken, maybe even a year. Their last conversation had ended in silence, both of them too proud, too hurt to say what they really wanted to say. But as the melody continued in the background, she felt something shift. That wall between them, the one built from distance, misunderstandings, and public pressure, started to crack. She whispered to herself, maybe it's time to stop pretending. The next morning, Demet called her manager and asked, "Who uploaded this song? I need to know." Within hours, she had her answer. It was uploaded by an anonymous account linked to an Italian recording studio. And there was only one person who could have recorded it there. Her heart pounded as she realized what this meant. He hadn't just written the song for her. He had released it for her to find. Demet couldn't sleep that night. The song kept echoing in her head, every lyric hitting deeper the more she thought about it. She kept replaying the same line over and over, "You left, but your heart stayed with me." It wasn't just music. It was a message. And she knew it was meant for her. The next morning, Istanbul was glowing with early sunlight, but inside her apartment, everything felt heavy. She made coffee, but it turned cold before she could take a sip. Her thoughts were stuck on one thing, why now? Why, After all this time, would Can choose to share something so raw, so intimate, so obviously tied to their story? Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let it fade like a dream. But another part, the one that still remembered how he smiled when no one was watching, couldn't let it go. She picked up her phone again. His number was still saved, untouched. The screen flashed his name, Yaman telephone receiver. Her thumb hovered over it for a long time. Then, finally, she pressed call. The line rang once. Twice. 3 times. Her heart pounded louder with every second. Then, a voice. Demet? It was him. Calm, low, slightly confused, but unmistakably him. For a moment, neither spoke. It was the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. You wrote that song, she finally whispered. You found it, he said softly. How could I not? You knew I'd hear it. He chuckled quietly. Maybe I hoped you would. Demet's voice trembled. Why, Can? After everything that's happened, why release it now? There was a long pause on his end. When he spoke again, his voice was rough, honest, stripped of the performer, the star, the mask. Because I never said goodbye properly. Those words hit her harder than she expected. Because deep down, she knew, neither of them ever did. Their story had ended without closure, swallowed by schedules, rumors, and distance. You could have just called me, she said. I did, he answered quietly. You didn't pick up. Her breath caught. She remembered that day. A missed call she had seen late at night but ignored, thinking it was better that way. Now, that tiny decision felt enormous, like the moment where everything could have changed if only she had answered. I thought you'd moved on, she whispered. So did I, he replied. Until I played that song. Tears rolled down her cheeks again, silent and warm. There was so much she wanted to say, but every word felt too fragile. Can, she said, her voice barely audible, that song, it broke me. It broke me too, he replied. But I needed to finish it. I needed to let it go. Then came a long silence, the kind that makes time stop. So what now? She finally asked. Now, he said, after a pause. Now we stop hiding from what it was. Maybe the world doesn't need to know. But we do. Demet smiled faintly through her tears. You're still impossible, you know that? And you're still my favorite impossible story, he said softly. When the call ended, neither of them felt the same. Something had shifted. Something unspoken, unfinished, finally breathed again. That night, she opened her phone once more, pressed play, and listened to the song again. But this time, she didn't cry. She just smiled, closed her eyes, and whispered, I heard you, Can. And somewhere in Rome, sitting at the same piano where it all began, he whispered back, I know. What neither of them expected, what neither of them was ready for, happened just a few days later. The song, that private piece of his heart, suddenly became public. It started quietly. A few fans on Twitter noticed the familiar voice in the unknown artist upload. They began to compare it to clips of Can from interviews, matching the tone, the phrasing, even the way he breathed between lines. Within hours, the hashtag you left but your heart stayed with me was trending. People all over the world were asking the same question, did Yaman really write this song for Demet Özdemir? Clips flooded TikTok, fan edits of the two together, scenes from Erkenci Kuss, behind-the-scenes laughter, tears, and that final look they shared in the series finale. Over those clips, the song played softly in the background, turning the entire internet into a stage for their story. Can's phone started buzzing nonstop. His manager called first. Then journalists. Then record producers who wanted to officially release the track. But he ignored them all. Because for him, it wasn't about fame or numbers. It was about her. Demet's phone wasn't quiet either. Her team warned her, if anyone asks, say you don't know anything about the song. But silence wasn't easy this time. Because deep down, she did know. She knew every word, every line, every chord. It was their story, told in music. She saw one fan comment that made her heart stop: "He never stopped loving her. This song is proof." And in that moment, she realized, maybe love doesn't disappear. Maybe it just changes form. Meanwhile, Ken sat in his apartment in Rome, scrolling through the chaos online. Every video, every post, every translation of his lyrics was like someone peeling back layers of his soul. But instead of fear, he felt peace. The world finally knew what he'd kept hidden for years. He poured himself a glass of wine, looked out over the Roman skyline, and whispered, "So this is what it feels like to be understood." That same night, an Italian journalist reached out to him, asking for an interview about the mysterious song. Against everyone's expectations, Ken agreed. During the interview, the journalist leaned forward and asked gently, "Was the song for Demet Özdemir?" Ken paused for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then, with that familiar half-smile, he said, "Let's just say, every song needs a muse. And she was mine." The moment that line aired, the internet exploded again. Fans went wild, celebrities reposted clips, magazines printed headlines like, "Yaman finally admits the truth about Demet. The song that reveals everything." Demet watched the interview from her apartment. Her hands trembled slightly as she saw his face on the screen, calm yet full of something she couldn't quite define. Regret, maybe. Or closure. Or both. Then, in the final seconds of the interview, Ken looked directly into the camera, and said softly, "You left, Demet, but your heart stayed with me." It wasn't just a lyric anymore. It was his truth. Spoken, raw, and eternal. That night, Demet sat by her window, listening to the city hum below. The song was everywhere, playing in cafes, cars, even on the radio. She smiled through her tears, whispering, "The world finally knows." But little did either of them realize, this was only the beginning. Because soon, fate would give them one last chance to face everything, not through screens, not through music, but in person. It happened unexpectedly, as all the most important moments do. A charity gala in Milan. A red carpet. Flashing lights. Reporters shouting questions in every direction. Neither of them knew the other would be there. Neither was prepared. Demet arrived first, elegant in a black gown that shimmered under the lights. She smiled politely, answered a few questions, posed for photos, the perfect image of calm professionalism. But inside, her heart raced. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew. Somehow, she felt it, he was near. And then, a sudden wave of noise. Cameras turned. People began to shout his name. Ken Yaman. She didn't have to look. She knew the sound of that voice being called too well. When she finally turned, their eyes met, across a sea of lights and people, across years of silence and distance. In that instant, time stopped. He looked different, yet exactly the same. His hair shorter, his beard more defined, but the same warmth, the same eyes that once looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Neither smiled. Neither spoke. But the world around them seemed to fade. For a moment, they were just Ken and Demet again, not actors, not public figures, not rumors or headlines. Just two people who had once loved deeply and lost just as deeply. The photographers, sensing the tension, began clicking faster. Reporters whispered excitedly, "Is this their first reunion? Are they talking again? Is this about the song?" Demet broke eye contact first, pretending to check her phone. But Ken, he didn't look away. Instead, he walked toward her. Slow, steady, deliberate. Every step felt like an echo of everything they had been through. When he finally reached her, the noise around them blurred into a distant hum. "You heard it," he said quietly. She nodded, barely breathing. "I did." "And?" She looked at him for a long moment, eyes glistening. "And it reminded me why it hurt so much to lose you." Ken's expression softened, his guard completely gone. I never wanted to hurt you, Demet. The song wasn't about pain. It was about what's left when the pain is gone. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. And what's left, can? He hesitated, then smiled faintly. You. There it was, simple, honest, devastating. The truth they had both avoided for years, now standing between them under the glare of cameras and lights. But this time, they didn't run from it. Demet took a small step closer. The crowd erupted in flashes, but neither of them cared anymore. You know, she whispered, that song, it's everywhere now. I can't go anywhere without hearing it. Good, he replied softly. Then maybe you'll remember me when it plays. As if I could ever forget, she said. He chuckled under his breath, the kind of laugh that carried both sadness and peace. Then, as the event continued around them, Ken reached into his pocket and handed her something small, a USB drive, simple and silver. What's this? She asked. The original recording, he said. It's yours. It always was. Demet looked at it in silence, her fingers trembling slightly. Then she whispered, you left, but your heart really did stay. He smiled softly, eyes glimmering. And maybe that's enough. The next day, news outlets around the world published the photo, Can and Demet, standing close, looking into each other's eyes, both smiling for the first time in years. Headlines screamed, the reunion that broke the internet. The song that brought them back together. But what the world didn't see was the final moment after the camera stopped. Demet turned to him one last time and said, you know, Ken, every story deserves an ending. He nodded. Then let's make ours the kind that never really ends. And as the lights dimmed, the music from the gala shifted softly into a familiar melody, his song. Demet closed her eyes and whispered to herself, almost smiling, you left, but your heart stayed with me. And somewhere, beneath all the noise, his voice answered quietly, always.